In this video, I'll be installing an inline electric fuel pump on my 1951 Chevy. This is my diagram. For the fuel line, I have a 100 micron fuel filter right before the electric fuel pump to filter out as many particles as it can. Then after the fuel pump, there's a 40 micron fuel filter, and that goes to the mechanical fuel pump. Then I have a toggle switch that goes to the fuel pump. I'm only using this pump to prime the mechanical one, because if you leave it running the whole time, it's just going to burn out. So from the accessory pin on the ignition switch is going to a 10 amp fuse. That fuse is going to the switch, and it will protect both the switch and the fuel pump. You have a ground on the outside and then two positives. You're going to have to use the continuity setting on your multimeter to determine which one's the ground and which one's a positive. When the switch is off, then you won't see any activity.
Alright, so now we're trying to plug off the gas tank so gas does not leak down onto us.
I recommend taking a hose into the fuel tank and siphoning it into a container and not trying to clamp the fuel line, because your fuel line, it could be really weak and not want to clamp up, instead it'll just crack.
Alright, so this gas line, it's clamped up in two places, I think. Maybe three. It was clamped up here and there. There's a clamp up there. And then there's another clamp right up here, but it's bolted in. So 15mm. Does it fit me? Too big? Too big.
This went into the engine to that little fuel pump. That screwed into there, and this was the end that went into the rubber. And then this was on the steel fuel line that screwed into this here. Now this does not have to be taken off. We only took it off because we tried to pinch it, and like, this is not rubbery anymore. So don't make the mistake we did and empty your gas tank out beforehand, or pinch it off if the fuel line is good enough. But alright, then I measured the fuel line that we took out, and it was about over 6 foot long. So I've bent this tubing. I've straightened it out to as long as this is, and I've added a little extra slack. Going to the engine is not a completely straight path. So imagine this is the side of the frame, and the engine's up there at the end. It's going to have to bend at the end there. It's going to have rubber at the end with that outlet. This is the gas tank up here. It's empty. And then we want to have a line, a rubber line going from this down here, and then we're going to have the filters and then the pump. Alright, now I have the pump, and it comes with everything you need. It comes with bolts, outlet, it goes to here, it screws in, and then you can put a rubber hose on it. Even better, it comes with the pre-built in grounding cable connection, so I can just ground it to the other side of the frame. Alright, I grabbed this Moto Seal gasket maker at O'Reilly's. This was expensive. It was like $16 just for this 2 ounce, almost 3 ounce little tube. So use it conservatively. I'm going to apply the gasket maker to the threads. Now this stuff is flammable, and you would want to use gloves. I'm using a paper towel to apply it. I'm just going to add some. I poked a little hole in here So not much is going to come out. Might need a little more, but that's okay. Plenty. See how much I applied there. Now you're just going to want to work your way around like this. And you can see the gasket maker in the threads. Don't add too much pressure to it because you don't want to wipe it all off. So, almost just thread this in. Allow to set for 1 minute. Allow 24 hours of cure time to ensure a proper seal. So, if you're planning on running this the next day, don't wait like a full day. Give it maybe even 2 days just to make sure, you know. And once we get gas going through it, I want to make sure that this does not leak. I'm not going to try to start up the engine because if there is a leak, I do not want a fire. Alright, now I'm under the vehicle again. I have my magnet dish holding up this bolt. And then I have the pump. It's going to go right on top of this here. That's perfect. Alright, I'm grounding the pump to the back side. So these will hold on the ground and the pump in place.
So when I went to ground it the first time, this area up here wasn't bare metal. It was just painted, and then there was some bare metal in the center. That didn't work as a ground, so I just sanded it down with some 120 grit sandpaper. I only did that small hole. Now I'm going to get rid of some of that rust in there with some rust dissolver, and then after that I'm going to put dielectric grease on it and then put my ground wire and put it back on, add a little more grease. I just went to one of my local auto parts stores. So this end was on here. This is the new part. But this end was on here, and that went to the fuel line. And then this side went to the gas tank. Now what was on here was this. This was on here. But I took it off. And then we got a new 5/16 connector. And I put this on here. This old hose cracked and it's not steel reinforced. It has a bunch of like string in it. I'm going to put gasket maker. I'm going to put it on the threads of both ends. We're going to make the line for the pre-filter into the gas tank. Just built this line here. Got 2.5 inches on this side. And I have my nut that goes on the end of this, and I got a crescent or adjustable wrench. I tightened it as much as I could. I also put that Permatex on there so that it doesn't leak. Right now, I'm actually going to measure how much this is. I'm not trying to put too much bend into this. I just applied some more Moto Seal. I took my 1/2-inch wrench, put it on the bottom of this here, and then I used this adjustable wrench on top of it to tighten it down. Alright, I put more Moto Seal onto this. Put it up in this gas tank hole here. That should hold.
So I recut this to 9 inches instead of 8.5, so it's flush against this.
If you put enough, you will see that on the inside that the motor seal liquid starts pushing up. Right, then there's 3 different barbs on this. So just push it on here, and it's pretty much flush with the nut.
So the rubber's starting to show through the clamp, so that means it's getting tight, and you shouldn't tighten it any further, otherwise you're going to damage it. Now I just need you to tighten this one up. I also went to AutoZone last night to get more hose clamps. This is a pack of 10, and it was only about $7.50.
Now I'm going to have to put rubber on the end of this. I'm going to use the spare that I cut too short, and then I'm going to get the steel and put it up there, and I'm going to have to cut the steel down as well because it's also too long.
I just went under the truck. My helper held the end of the tape measure and put it up against the inlet of the fuel pump, and I put the other end of the tape measure at the rubber hose, and we measured 50 inches, so I gave myself 2 inches extra so I can put in some bends, so it'll be 52 inches altogether. I bent the hose again. It's the perfect size now, but I cut it a little bit too short. It's going to go to the left and then up a little and straight, and then I'm going to have rubber hose. So we held up the steel line under the truck and placed it's going to be. The distance between the pump and the steel line is 4.5 inches. It's about 4 inches, but I want to give the rubber hose 4.5 so it has space to grab on. I finished this piece of hose. I put the end of this fitting into here, and then it wouldn't go all the way up against it just from pushing them together, so I put this face down and just push on it, and now you can see it's flush. Alright, I used my adjustable wrench to tighten up the nut into the fuel pump. You can see the motor seal starting to come out, which means there was plenty of liquid on the threads, so that's once that cures, it'll have a really good seal. Now we're going to get the steel line connected to this. Alright, we've installed the steel line. We took the old copper bracket that was holding up the old line up there, and we moved it back here. I put one of the bolts through one of the rusty holes here, and now it's holding up this rubber line. So it's removed a lot of the play in the line, and it honestly should be good enough. Yeah, but now I just need to get a wrench on that.
Now I'm going to work on the wiring. This is 16 gauge, and I already have some 16 gauge laying around, so we're going to strip this down a bit. Now I'll have to connect this to some more wire. It's going to go under the frame along this fuel line. It's going to go up to the dash to a toggle switch.
Got a crimper, my wire, a connector, and heat shrink.
One recommendation I have is put bullet connectors on the end of the pump and then the end of the wire going into the dash, because these pumps tend to wear out quick, and having a bullet connector is great because you can just easily swap them. You wouldn't have to chop the wire when you have to go to replace it. You just unplug it. Either use a bullet connector or other push connectors.
Wiring to the toggle switch, I have the output wire in the center, And then I have the one going from the ignition switch on the outside, and it's going to a 10 amp fuse. So switch will be perfectly safe from being overloaded, as well as the fuel pump. The ground goes to this screw that's holding up the oil pressure gauge. All I'd need to do next is create a bracket for it to hold it into place. I also need to organize all this wiring. Alright, it works. I'll make it brackets in another video. I have an idea of what I want to do, but that's for the separate video. So I hope you enjoyed this one, and I will see you later.